Well, hello, everybody. My name is John Barnwell, and I'm here north of the city of Detroit. And I'm here with my good friend and another lifelong anthroposophist, Joe Visconti, out in Connecticut, the Constitution State. And he's the president of the American Shakespeare Theatre. He's a former gubernatorial candidate for the state of Connecticut, and he's an Emmy Award winning videographer and a musician, a songwriter, an actor, and
You got it almost right. Emmy Award winning producer. Somebody froze up. Okay, I'm here. John's
yeah,
back.
sorry.
Okay. I
My,
was going to start taking the show over, but I don't want to be a video hog over here.
yeah, no, I don't know what to say. It just, my browser crashed. And
Well, if that happens again, I'll do the show on my own. Just don't cut the
yeah,
feed.
just,
I'll just take over. Yeah.
Anyway, so where were we? Okay, so I introduced Joe, and this is Rudolf Steiner on the Grail language part 7. And based on the conversation here with Joe, I could see this is going to be an interesting episode. And it says the computer froze up. Well, my browser crashed, so I was probably still on camera while I was in a panic mode.
No, you're just a frozen image of you. That's all.
Yeah, that's okay. So, anyways, all this distraction that's part of the world in which we live, and as we look in current day events, there's an endless stream of distractions and disruptions, and I guess that actually puts a kind of a punctuation mark on the conversation that we were thinking of having today, because we were having a discussion the other day regarding events that transpired in the 4th century, and in the 300s, which is a very critical point in the history of the mystery of Golgotha as presented in the work of Dr. Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophy, or Spiritual Science. So, being that Joe, my good friend Joe here, was the one who came up with this idea, let's see what he starts off with. Joe, how you doing there?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me again. I have to say, the last few days have been. I had to put a blue blazer on for this one. This one here, I think somehow we have to, 100 years from now, people will talk about, if we get it right today, to articulate the concepts that is so important to lay people, to the average person um, who is struggling with material science, which is most of our left brain and the way we think today, and the spiritual world, whatever that means to lay people, contrary to or opposite of religion. What does it really mean? And because I'm in politics, I always have that angle where I try to say, I wonder how do I articulate this bureaucracy and dumb it down? I hate to say that word, but put it into a language, Grail language, actually is becoming more streetwise. It's almost like street Grail. How do we get some of these concepts we're going to discuss today about building that Golden Gate Bridge between San Francisco, the material world, and Sausalito, the spiritual world? It really is a bridge. And we're all crossing that bridge unconsciously for the most part today. But some information came to me, and a few different things came to John. And in the last couple of days, and I'm beating around the bush here, but what it is, it's going to entail this a scientific um, bridge of just where spirit meets matter. And we pick up different things that we see posted in social media, amongst even our studies individually. And a few things came across our path by people posted. And it's really great that people put things up, because you never know with anthroposophy what's going to kind of trigger you and go, wait a minute, holy smoke. So no matter where you are at whatever Grail level, you're kind of always in kindergarten. And some things came up with Christ, the host, um, and what that means, and where and when mankind started to not believe in this transubstantiation, the spirit in matter. And that occurred around the 9th century that the debate began. And it wasn't until the 12th century that the Catholic Church created the dogma of the transubstantiation. And John brings up the 4th century, where Rudolf Steiner says that the world ended in 333 AD, or would have ended without the mystery of Golgotha. So I'm going to let John jump in right over here, but we're going to try to deliver something that actually we probably all thought about, no matter what church, Protestant or Catholic or other denominations that you were part of growing up, and you wondered, is Christ in the bread? What does that mean? How does that work? And do I just have to keep having faith in a time of materialistic science, or is there an answer? Is there a way where we can use language to bridge it so we can comprehend what occurs? And then, John, I'd love you to hit off with the nirvana thing we spoke about, because that was a heck of an angle.
Well, that's one thing that you can be sure of, that if you study Rudolf Steiner for any length of time, you'll see that his basic modus operandi is to approach subjects from many different vantage points. Rather than defining them, he continually will approach a subject from another angle, bringing into context another period of time, another cycle of activity. And so coming to understand this overlap is a big part of what it means being human. And this is all about being human. And so when you bring up that critical statement that Rudolf Steiner made, that was really quite, I mean, if that's not a shocker, I don't know what is, that basically, had the mystery of Golgotha not happened, life as we know it would have come to a close in 333 AD. I mean, that's profound, but somebody who's a scientist would just roll their eyes and walk away. And I hear a few leaving the room right now, and that's okay, because not everybody's prepared to be able to take up the new mysteries, shall we call them. And there's a key to understanding the mystery of Golgotha that I mentioned on numerous occasions, but it's so critical because Rudolf Steiner says that the incarnation of Christ with the crucifixion and the whole cycle leading through to the resurrection, that the etheric body and physical body were saved for all mankind. That includes everybody. But that if mankind were to take up the challenge of developing the other two fundamental principles, the astral body and the ego, that it would be up to the individual at this time to take up the challenge, and that the organ was formulated in the reconfiguration of the frontal part of the brain to be able to take up this new way of approaching consciousness in the front of the brain. The modifications, the subtle modifications of the convolutions of the brain that were brought into being during the roughly 350-year cycle of Gabriel gave us an innate capacity. Again, this is for everyone. It's there to be able to take up the task of this transformation of the astral and etheric body, and astral and ego, excuse me. And so what does that mean? Well, if we go back to the 3rd century, we could see that at that time, this critical juncture was reached, but yet it's coming in waves, the Christ impulse. So if you take 333, that was a critical year in which there was a meeting of 4 of the leading masters of wisdom and the harmonization of sensations and feelings as to what would be the nature of the new mysteries. And so maybe we can we'll do an episode just on that subject because there's so many dimensions to it. I don't want to elaborate too long here, but that taking up that impulse in the West, it's known as Rosicrucianism. And that's true Rosicrucianism. It's not specifically pointing out anybody that would have an advertisement in popular mechanics or anything like that. And not doing anything against all that, because everybody has pieces of the mosaic. And so when we come to understand what is this, it has to do with the fact that mankind has entered into abstract relationship to the world, the way in which they have taken up the intellect in the most material way in the cyclic evolution of mankind, because we moved from the intellectual soul to the consciousness soul, which actually has a specific relationship with the physical body. And so, which is our challenge, to take the consciousness soul and transform it into the spiritual soul, to be able to receive the spirit self. The experience of one's guardian angel is one way of looking at it. And so you have all these super sensible realities, but we were talking in reference to the mystery of the Eucharist. And there's a lot that we can add in understanding why mankind lost their way regarding that subject, but that it was part and parcel of a cyclical movement into the intellectual soul. And that in the intellectual soul period, which is Rudolf Steiner on other occasions describes it as the high feeling soul. And so it has a specific relationship to the etheric body. And so in looking at that and seeing that by developing it in the brain, in the intellect of the brain, so to speak, that shadow of reality on which we conceive our thinking. At that time, though, they were still in touch with the possibility of coming into a realm of higher feeling. And that's significant because that's part of our legacy from our past incarnations, is that we've gone through, many of us have been through initiations in various cultures and so forth. So you have this whole store of personal development that you've gone through in other incarnations, according to spiritual science. And those are resources that are there. It's just that you don't happen to know about them or know what to do with them. And likewise, the future is a resource.
And I'd like to jump in here and bring in that Eucharist again, because as mankind was questioning in the 9th century and up to the 12th century about spirit and matter, could Christ really be present? Can spirit be present in matter? More and more as the intellectual soul comes in, up to the French Revolution, which John will take off in a minute on, what occurred naturally had to happen. But this is the interesting part that brings me to where we are today as I tie this little second span of the Golden Gate Bridge together for you all, is what happened when we were losing the ability to perceive the aura of Christ in the Eucharist. What occurred? More and more mankind lost the ability. Material science, more of a left brain, abstract thinking occurred, and man lost again, lost his way, almost like before the mystery of Golgotha, lost his way again. And this is very important. Also, Rudolf Steiner speaks about the forces that are present in the Eucharist, in the mystery of Golgotha, are also present in karma. And this is really the key point right here that I'm going to try to pull in the boat like a big anchor here. As we lost the ability to see the aura, to believe and see the spirit and matter, karma was also given basically a death blow, where people did not believe in karma, destiny, more and more up until our time. But Rudolf Steiner also states that if Ahriman and Lucifer, and especially Ahriman, is able to wrest away mankind from believing in karma, then he will be given an opportunity when he's born in each life to have a clean slate without the karma. This is the aims of Ahriman and Lucifer. And if he is given a clean slate without the interference or the pre-made in heaven, our destiny and our karma that comes in whether we're born, and if they could cut that off and give us a clean slate, almost like the socialism, or let's just call it communism of Russia, everyone has been given something, they can decide what they want to be, heaven is cut off, there is no preordained meaning to your life beyond what the state gives. At that point, this is the key right here, Ahriman would then take every misdeed that we do from that clean slate life without karma, and we would be welded to Ahriman. In other words, he would become the Lord of karma. This is his aim. He wants to be the Lord of karma the way he wants to do it. Again, always replacing Christ in the cosmos. And this would, Rudolf Steiner continues, cut off the cosmic order. He goes into speaking about that, which is horrific. Cut off the gods, cut off heaven completely. If Ahriman is able to do this, and so this is so important. I'm going to let John pick it up right here, because what's going to occur when we get a little more technical on carbon and Philosopher's Stone later in the show, you're going to see today what's really going on in our government, no matter what party you belong to, what really are the aims of technology and forces that are looking to use those newborn things to enslave us, weld us to Ahriman, versus using technology as something helpful. John, take it away.
Yes, well, in a paper that was written by Alfred Heidenreich, the Christian community priest, that Joe brought up the other day, it's very much to the point and really kind of stimulated us having this conversation in the first place, because within that article, he talks about the new mysteries, and he says, and I quote, in his lectures during the last war, especially towards the end of the last war, Rudolf Steiner spoke grave and earnest words about the influences of the churches in Western civilization. And of course, it'd be World War I. Two sets of lectures which touch on this subject stand out. The Karma of Materialism and Gesunder Blick für heute und wahre Hoffnung für morgen. That's not translated, so I haven't had a chance to chase that one down yet. And to continue, in them, sentences like these in which Rudolf Steiner summarizes his critical analysis can be found. And he quotes Rudolf Steiner. The church has been more of an institution for not understanding the mystery of Golgotha than for understanding it, end quote. And another quote, if one wishes to understand the historic psychological origin of modern materialism, one must seek it in the church, end quote. And Alfred Heidenreich continues, in the cycle on the karma of materialism, he states openly that in the 9th century, a lodge was founded in Sicily, which began to work towards turning the church, to all intents and purposes, into a society for the prevention of Christian knowledge.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Christ opposes his own church. But let's stay on this Golden Gate Bridge I've kind of given this little name to today, just so you have an image in your mind of a bridge connecting to lands. And it really is the land, spirit land. Rudolf Steiner, they use the term spirit land. And you'll always see water associated with emotion, feeling, land connected with consciousness. And so the consciousness of the land of, I'll call it Sausalito, the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge, or on the way there, and San Francisco. Again, this is just a little imagery so you can stay a little focused on this heavy subject that we're going to bring in. But what, from my world in anthroposophy, I have been trying to get to the root cause, and it's hard, no matter what you may know or think you know, it always gets hard to grasp that spirit meets matter. And this is so important of what the forces today are seeking to do. And again, it has to do with time. John mentioned that on the phone with me yesterday in a deep conversation that Armin wants to wrest us time away from us and make us space beings. And so what happens is, if we have that clean slate without karma, more and more mankind will become a space being. More and more, the technology will be utilized to build and create, almost like Devacon on Earth, or the eighth sphere, while we are alive. This is so important. We are all feeling it across the world and across America. Again, this is not about campaigns and party systems. It's about what we all feel. Something's going on and we can't figure out. And a lot of those on the left and the right would more think of this as forces that are establishment or deep states or whatever. But really, the aim is darker forces are seeking to strip away the karma as well as Christ from us, because this goes also biologically within us. And I can't say enough about how it hit me that there was a place, there's a war going on in our blood. There's a war going on in our soul. There's a war going on in all of our cellular levels right now, almost like a sci-fi movie. This war is going on, this stress and tension that many people feel. We can give many things different names, but the key thing that's occurring is there's a tug of war for the soul of humanity to replace Christ and the cosmic order from the earth and to bring it to 333 AD, to actually end it. And this is also a form and a force that's coming from the being Sorath. Contrary to Armin and Lucifer's activity, Sorath wants to destroy the planet Earth, the human being, the soul, Christ, and our ego. Destruction of it, not enslavement of it, or as Lucifer would do, lure us to his sphere. This would be the destruction of it. And so that is the hardest thing that's occurring in the context. I'm going to go to this, is so important, what Rudolf Steiner says. Our only protection against it is the knowledge and understanding of it. We are protected, so don't fear these things. You're protected if you can comprehend and try to comprehend some of the things we're laying out and other things you may be working on, and you'll see there's forces always opposing your meditation, and maybe the ideas can slip in like they did for me over the last 4 days, and John came in somewhere else, so there's always people to help us work, if you're in groups, to get to the point that's so critical. This is unique in its distribution, because we're putting this information in the sub-physical world. That's where this is going on YouTube. We're putting a truth, a truth that's so important, it can change the world by our consciousness of it. And this is, again, so important. Don't dismiss at home anything you may learn and study. Think you're on an island and nobody knows. You're changing the world every day. And there are forces that want to replace Christ, replace God, the hierarchies, the cosmos, and want to put in their own order. And every other thing we know about these forces are true. But the key here is they want to blow up the Golden Gate Bridge to make sure that there is no communication between Sausalito and San Francisco, and you cannot think or receive spiritual. And the last thing I'll say before John gets in here is that remember what Rudolf Steiner said during the First World War: the spiritual atmosphere of the world he was not able to bring down many things for the cosmic world. He could not bring them in because of the war and the soldiers that were dying by the hundreds of thousands. So creating war on earth or also disease will also inhibit communications coming to not just initiates, but individual people. And we've all felt there's something wrong with the world since COVID. There's something wrong, something going on. We can't get back on track. Nobody can. We think it's just this or that, but there are forces. The consciousness of what's happening to us, almost like what we learned about COVID after COVID, the consciousness of it is our protection, and it will be able to hold back these darker forces that Armin wants to do to us.
Yes. And so you have that reflex point of 333 AD that becomes challenged in around 666 AD with the impulses coming out of Judi Shapur that I've made reference to on other occasions. And then you have that whole idea of that there's this development of cycles based on these numbers. And within apocalyptic thinking, you can gain specific insights into the workings of these phenomena, whether for Christ or understanding those forces that are adversarial to Christ, keeping in mind, of course, that Christ is infinitely more powerful than the adversaries, but that doesn't mean that one won't fall for their wiles. So that being said, we're not here to paint this whole picture of doom and gloom and fear. On the contrary, it's the whole idea of the understanding of hope, and that's something that can arrive in its development through wonder, awe, and reverence, like we frequently say, and that's that sacramentalism that we keep referring to, consecrating one's meal before one consumes it, trying to take a consecrated mood of soul into sleep, because this is where it really happens. And Rudolf Steiner is very clear. He says that the higher understandings that one is encountered, that these things come to you while you're asleep, but you're unconscious of it, or at the very best dreaming, and that's largely the imagery that arises when the astral body and ego return from a night's sleep, and they are dealing with that which reflects out of the etheric body, which could happen to be something as simple as that you had spaghetti for dinner, or certain encounters during the day, or certain distractions that are in the room at the time the dream is happening. But yet there's behind this a deeper level of content that when one enters the higher worlds, according to Rudolf Steiner, that you come into a relationship with these beings of the higher worlds. And to continue on from Alfred Heidenreich, he says, and this has to do with that whole idea of coming into an understanding that brings about this mood of soul, of hope. He says, and I quote, "The objective significance of the act of consecration of man," which is the Eucharist, communion, "the objective significance of the act of consecration of man lies in the fact that it keeps alive and revivifies the etheric body of the earth. Without it," Rudolf Steiner compared the etheric light which it creates with the sunrise, So much as the light of the sun is lighter than the darkness of night, he said, so much as the light that rises on the altar lighter than the light of the sun. Out of this light, the foundations of the future Jupiter state of our earthly planet form themselves. The alchemistic process enacted in the act of consecration of man produces Jupiter substance. In their objective significance, the elements of bread and wine are alchemistically transmuted into what is known as the body and blood of Christ, which is the seed and leaven of the future planetary evolution. In this respect, the act of consecration of man acts from the center of Rosicrucian Christianity.
Wow. So we get a picture here of what's really going on when you go to church. How many of us have sat in the pew wondering?
Or even saying grace. It's important that we expand our perception of this, because in coming to a realization of what you're doing, that Rudolf Steiner said that, remember that Christ he's in the etheric world. And what is the etheric world? That's the world of the plants, and all living things have an etheric body, so that he's in that realm, so that we can fortify our relationship to the Christ most directly at this cycle in time through a conscious relationship to that world. So I don't want to exclude people that aren't Catholic or aren't involved in Christian community, because it has to do with the consecration, the sacramentalism that you bring into your personal realm.
Well, what got me on this particular subject was wondering, and many of you may have, I'll go back to this, in your religion or wherever, or just if you're not religious, somewhere you may have thought of a thought and wondered, and you didn't get an answer. But the more of anthroposophy that you absorb and work with, when you wonder, there's enough, I'll call it spiritual matter, that will start to work. Angelic beings, a spiritual world will open as you wonder. It's not given by measure, but at the same time, when I wondered about a few things, I said, what about this? And I waited a couple days, and then you wait. I don't know how everyone else listening gets some of the information, but you'll be doing a daily task, something small, and then you'll hear something, or you'll visually see it, one or both. And then you'll have a piece and a few pieces, and you'll keep working on it. And this isn't really studying, it's just working on you. And we're trying to remain conscious. I guess that's the big point here. We're trying to, throughout this process, remain conscious, where our guardian angel can work with us, because they do graduate, according to Rudolf Steiner, into a higher rank as they work with us with this spiritual knowledge consciously. And again, adversarial forces would like us to sleep through this and not be awake and receive this in our daily conscious life. There's something about being conscious with it that the guardian angel will be able to, if not graduate, move up in their development. And otherwise, during this consciousness soul period, that's why it's called consciousness soul, something will be lost. It will just be harmful for us in our inability to develop further in another life, but it also affects the spiritual world, other beings. So what we do is affecting many different people in our daily life, as well as in the spiritual realm. And we don't consider that. We kind of all feel that what we do for us, and we're in the time of rights, so I can do what I want. It's not hurting anybody. It's not affecting anyone. Yes, it is. Everything is affecting everyone. Again, that's not doom and gloom, but it's a reality that we aren't able to quantify. And because we can't quantify it in this time of abstract thinking, we feel that our activity, our hope, as John just said, isn't there. And it should be there. I mean, this whole thing for me has kind of shocked me. I'd like to get into the part, John, because he articulates it so well. He did to me, but about the Philosopher's Stone, the carbon situation, and maybe add that at this point.
Yeah, you caught me pulling something up. So
Ah,
that whole idea of again looking at the world from a sacramental viewpoint is like when you get into understanding. For example, we look at the disputes in the Middle Ages between the realists and the nominalists, and Rudolf Steiner says that the realists had a sense that there was something there and a reverence toward that. And they were expressing that level of the higher feeling soul. But that the nominalists considered that the relationship of language to the world is arbitrary, so to speak. And so that it doesn't have an objective relationship to it. And so it kind of is detaching itself from that spiritual inspiration, even though it's true that the realists or those that were dealing with the objective reality and considering it such that, but they couldn't articulate it. So you have this dilemma of the people that believe in it, but they can't really articulate it. And then you got the people that, well, you can't really articulate it because it's just an arbitrary mental construction based on language, that language doesn't have an objective relationship. And which is, in keeping with the title of this series, is it not? The Grail language. So what do we have there? Well, what we have is that in the Grail literature, it talks about that the angels took the Holy Grail and lifted it up to heaven to await the coming of an individual who was worthy enough to be the Grail king. And of course, that's quite an image, but you have to understand that initiatory literature speaks in pictographic language that leaves it more free and open. And so if you go to the scriptures of any particular religion, they're going to be giving you pictures, mental pictures, describing things with that picture language. But in the Grail, what we have is that whole culmination of taking this aspect of cosmic intelligence and lifting it up into the spiritual world, up into the realm of the angels, to await the coming of the Grail King, Parsifal, who was the leader of that meeting that took place in the 4th century that I made reference to, of the masters of wisdom and the harmonization of sensations and feeling, and that he was the one who called that meeting together, so to speak, with Scythianos and the others. And so you have this, it's a terribly profound mystery, so profound, in fact, that I'm somewhat reticent to even talk about it because it's really part of the sacred legacy of mankind. But given the times we're in, I guess we have to keep moving along, and it's already out there. So it's not like I'm telling you a secret or anything like that. It's a secret to most people because they're busy having disputes on social media with people they don't know, But so it becomes increasingly interesting because what is that? That the Grail, this thing, that relates to this cosmic intelligence, and then you bring that into the context of the idea of the Eucharist, and that the Grail cup is a part of that Eucharist mystery, and then you see that you have the bread and the wine, and what is bread and wine? Well, it's that which arises out of the realm of carbon. And we know from elsewhere that Rudolf Steiner talks about that the resurrection body, the phantom physical body, as it's referred to, that it ties into, he talks about how the phantom physical body arises as a fluid diamond, and which points towards that mystery of carbon. And so you have diamonds are made of carbon. And the bread and wine, well, they're part of that carbon realm. And so what realm is challenging that realm of carbon at this time is the realm of silica. And that's the inanimate realm of measure, number, and weight. And so you have in juxtaposition between measure, number, and weight. On the other side, you have this whole idea of the pictographic presentation of the mysteries and carrying that forward into the new mysteries. And Rudolf Steiner says that what mankind has to do at this stage to activate their relationship to this is be able to take the realm of ideas and bring it into the realm of moral imagination. And so it be the beautiful imagery and seeing the mystery of the radiance of the Eucharist, or when you eat a meal, the radiance of the meal that you're eating, no matter how lowly it is, that it partakes of that realm in a very real sense. And through that sacralization of your day-to-day life, because as I've said before, Rudolf Steiner says there are no insignificant moments. And so this idea of sacramentalism, you can consecrate your world and it brings you a great bounty, but you might not be aware of it because it happens while you're sleeping.
That was good, John. That was good. And so what we see here is this war going on between the carbon and the silicon. We see a war going on where I hate to call it war, and it sounds dramatic and all that, but it's a struggle. It's a war. It happens in our white blood cells, and when there's an infection, scientists talk about that. It's a battle. And the struggle for us in our time is watching the our time. I'm just going to really try to be non-political about a political thing, because basically in our time, everything has become political, which really means policy making. And so if we look towards policy making, we'll see, and law, because part of policy making follows law, based on law as republics. And we're watching the meaning of words disappear, new words that don't mean what in conflict, laws that are written vague so their meaning isn't clear, a science that has side effects. So there's an aim to bring and deliver to a market something that can be duplicated, the power of duplication, versus this qualitative um, region, a spiritual region, which is more health giving. And so there's a dominance right now for drugs, for foodstuffs, for fashion, for everything. And it is the time of materialism. But Rudolf Steiner says something unique about that. He says the materialism that's here is because the desire, the need of mankind to become spiritual, as it's not fulfilled, if I can put it that way and paraphrase it, the materialism is an effect of the need to be spiritual. And when it's not, that activity is not transitioned by mankind, there'll be a dominance of matter and material things in the world that become more important. But they are truly a bounty, a spiritual bounty that we need to pick up and raise up, like the crown, like the Grail, when they put it on the king's head. And raise the cup up as the priest does. Raise up our thinking. Raise, as Jesus would say, raise your thoughts and desires. Raise our thoughts and desires, because this is the key. Our desires and our thinking do have, in a sense, a spiritual material. There is actual the sense of touch, imagination, inspiration, intuition. There is the sense of touch in the spiritual world. It's not the touch of matter, but it is a sense of touch, because many people think, well, when I die or when we go in the other world, there's no touching. There's all these things, but there is no ability to touch, and there is. It's a different touch. It's a different apocalyptic thinking, as John said. It's a different thinking. So we're at a crossroads where we have to go one way or the other. We're not able to just, and we have to keep our left brain and our ability, as we all probably have done, to talk to, I'll call them regular, normal people that aren't into anthroposophy. And we switch a window, click a window in our mind. We talk to them in the world we know with them. But then today we have to click another window. We're going to another language. Truly is. It's the language. Get ready for this. It's coming in. It's the language of meaning. It's the language of meaning. And that's really what the Grail is. It's the language of meaning. And again, meaning will go to, why did this happen to me? Karmically? Not all things are karmic, but it will affect karma. So even if something isn't part of karma in your daily life, it can affect the karma of others around. And that's really what the Lord of Karma is working at, the Christ in our time, to have our activity be such that it can work amongst people, even if it's not part of this karma, not I'm in the world, but not of the world. That thinking can actually happen. So it is hopeful and it is positive. We just have to wrap our head around what is going on with the opposing forces and how does that end up in our society, in our culture, and our policies. And it's a struggle, but when you know the heart of it, the root of it is in the Eucharist, it's right there in the life-giving formative forces of Christ to keep the planet etheric charged and alive, then that is, and it is electricity to your house if you want to put it in the material world. Cut the line, the lights go off.
Yes, that sacred bridge has been like under assault for quite some time, and in its most recent mode, really since the assassination of JFK, is really a key turning point as far as America's destiny in relation to all this. But so you see that when other people approach a lot of these things, they want to blame this, oh, it's the Freemasons, oh, it's this group and that group. It's not going deep enough, because many of these things that they try to blame for certain events that are happening, that they have a lack of understanding of the history of these things, such as like Freemasonry, that it came from a Christian foundation. In fact, Albertus Magnus wrote the rule book for the Freemasons of Cologne Cathedral, for example, so that there is very much a sacred mystery that is there, but that these things become switched out when other individuals come and take them up and point them in different directions, so that you have that idea of the story of Jesus Christ that's given by Rudolf Steiner in the Fifth Gospel Lecture Cycle, where he talks about Christ visiting the mystery sites, and instead of finding the divine presence, finding a demonic presence. So there's this whole idea that these things have played out and have been overrun by forces that were contrary to the forces that were working when they were founded. And likewise, we can find that in our modern world. In fact, to continue with Alfred Heidenreich, he says, previous to the spiritual act in which the act of consecration of man was instituted, Rudolf Steiner made, over a period of years, certain definite observations in attending the traditional forms of the Eucharist service in different countries of Europe. And he makes reference to the Fifth Gospel, like what I was just explaining to you. And then he says, Jesus then visited the mystery temples of Asia Minor, but instead of a divine presence, he found a demonic presence at the altars. Rudolf Steiner found that only in rare cases did the aura which manifests the reality of the divine presence still appear on Christian altars. In certain churches in Italy, he could still find it, he said. So you see that this whole idea of this life-giving force that in the Catholic Church they have a thing called a monstrance. It's a way of displaying the host, the bread from the communion, and there's like glass, and there's a host that's consecrated, put behind the glass, and then there's all this raying out in the gold of the monstrance vessel itself. And what is that? That radiance, that aura, that's like the halo of the saint. And so this is what he's talking about, is this, that is the service radiant? Is the divine presence to be found? And or is it something other than that? And so that's very much a really profound distinction that I'm afraid that a lot of people are not going to be able to follow me there, because they have a more of an anomalous view of things, and they can't wrap their head around something that would entail that supersensible reality as of yet. And so that's what becomes the challenge, is to be able to find the radiance in the world, that there's this living radiance that is in the world. And if we can live in the thoughts of that, we can help bring it forth.
And there's also something, John, that you spoke about with the grace, saying grace at meals. But churches were, at the beginning and many, many years later, were continued to be built on ley lines, on certain lines of the earth, energy lines throughout the earth. So as the masses were done and they were performed, the consecration and the Eucharist, the life-giving forces actually had something where the location, where on the planet. So location is like real estate. Location is a part. But yes, if you're out there and you're not Christian, or you have a problem with Jesus or things that we're speaking about, it's almost like politics in a way. Sometimes you got to get over the fact that it's not the things we were raised with, and the world that was polarizing. We're talking the cosmic Christ, and this is different than a religion in any form. But this is something that when I was beginning to wonder about it, it brought me to the really focal point. I can't stress enough what it did to me in the last couple of days, like nothing in many years. And it's not like a discovery. It was more of like, I finally got to like building the bridge. I was watching a video on the San Francisco piers that went in for the Golden Gate Bridge, and how they had to build all this stuff in the water and divers. And then after they built concrete, they were not on the bedrock yet. And they had to get underneath there with divers and hoses and sink this mammoth thing until it hit bedrock. Peter, Cephas, rock, the Holy Grail, rock, rock of ages. It had to hit the rock. And so this is what we're speaking about, that point when your consciousness and understanding and meaning merge right onto the rock that gives the stability for the bridge. Without that, it's floating luciferically in ideas and pieces and concepts of truth and reality. But the simplicity of this is something that hit me also. My God, it's so simple, and it was always there. But I could not see it because my mind wanted to understand spiritual things with a materialistic thinking when I was younger. And even to this day, we're all battling that materialistic thinking, that sleep state that's ornery and opposes the wonder. But if you can get by it, if you can open yourself enough, the spiritual world will reach in and help. But it's to hit the bedrock and the meaning and the simplicity of it, that our world is being given life, and we have to also join with Christ to spiritualize the earth. Again, that's the piece we haven't talked about either. Each one of us needs to work in our life individually and with groups to spiritualize the world, and to find that meaning, the meaning that the world seems to be wanting to remove meaning. As they're looking to remove time, the darker forces, they're looking to remove meaning. So things seem meaningless or not understood. time seems we're out of place. But we can get grounded with this information if you can try to conceive the fact that right at your cellular level, that there is a struggle going on for your soul and the soul of mankind. And in our time, it's really up to us consciously, I can't stress that enough, to want to join in this struggle and take the side of consciousness, understanding.
Yes. At the end of Alfred Heidenreich's article, he has a quotation, Rudolf Steiner, that addresses it, of the reality of the presence of the spirit in the sacred rites. And Rudolf Steiner said, "I know, my dear friends, how much there is in the heart of modern men which speaks against the sacramental. But whoever has experience in these things may also say something different. It might be thought that what may be called the emotional antagonism to ceremonial, which so easily arises in modern people, reveals something in them that might be the outcome of Christian evangelical consciousness. But I must confess to you that I have never really yet seen anyone in whom emotional antagonism to the sacrament has arisen out of love or goodness, but always out of the secret wickedness in human nature. This is a personal but actual observation. It is certainly a manifold process which we see emerging today, but that which is first irritated is really the opposing tendencies in human nature, which work against salvation. It is a goading by the same forces which say in the gospel, "We know you," and which then begin to fight against Christ because they recognize him. End quote. So there you have it.
Wow.
I mean, it's almost too profound for this kind of a venue to say that, because we all have that in us, and our approach to our Christology, our conception of Christianity makes a difference, is essentially what he's saying, because he included there, because there's the strong criticism in certain evangelical groups against the Eucharist. So what is that? And in fact, Rudolf Steiner says that really, if we want to understand the Eucharist, rather than leading it so much back to the Last Supper, it's to lead it back to the resurrection. And so I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank Joe. I think we've swam in the deep waters long enough for today, and I could see we're going to have to continue on in exploring this wonderfully profound subject. And I want to thank you all for coming here, and I want to thank contributions of a few individuals that have helped us along, Tyler and Douglas Gabriel, and of course my recent shows with Douglas and Tyler on the interview with the Exorcist on Douglas's channel, but also help from Ray and Whitney, and from Joe here, and Vadim and Vivian, and many other people. I didn't mention you. I love you anyways. But I want to thank you all for showing up, and this has been hopefully another thought-provoking episode of Rudolf Steiner on the Grail language.